All right, Title 3, General Provision, Secretarial Authority, Regulations, Title 30, U.S. Code 1751, Section 301. Secretary shall prescribe that each of such rules, regulations, ever the deems reasonable and necessary for the carry out of this Act. Rules and regulations issued implemented with the Act shall be issued with conformity in Section 553, Title 5 of the United States Code, notwithstanding Section 553A2 of this title. In addition, with the entering of an intercooperative agreement, the delegation of the authority authorized under this Act, the Secretary may contract such a non-federal government non-federal government inspectors, auditors, the other person with the deemed necessary for the aid of the carrying out functions under this Act, implementing the respect for the auditing and enforcement as functions action. Functions under this Act, the Secretary shall coordinate with such for the function to avoid maximum extent practicable to subjecting leasers and operators and other persons to do audit investigations of the same subject matter, but more than one auditing investigation at any of the same time. And that's contracts. Our reports. This is Supplemental Congress Title 30 U.S. Code 715 to 1752. Reports, Section 302. The Secretary shall submit with the Congress annual report with the implementation of the Act. Information to be included with the report format of the report shall be developed by the Secretary after consult with the Committees of the Interior and Insular Affairs of the House of Representatives on the energy and the natural resources of the Senate. The Secretary shall also report with the progress of the Department in reconciling account balances. Biannual audit submittal to Secretary of Congress, submittal to Secretary and Congress. Commencing official year of the 1984, the Inspector General of the Department of the Interior shall conduct the biannual audit of the Federal Royalty Management System. The Inspector General shall submit the result of the such of the audit to the Secretary to the Congress. Title 30 U.S. Code 752, study of the other materials, Section 303. Secretary shall study the question of the adequate royalty management of the costly coal, uranium, and other energy and non-energy minerals of the federal and Indian land. For the study, they shall include the proposed legislation. The Secretary determines if such legislation is necessary to ensure prompt, proper collection of the revenues of the owed to the United States of the state of the Indian tribes, Indian allotments from the sales and lease, other disposals of such minerals. Study required with the subsection A of this section shall be submitted to Congress no later than 1 year from the day of the enactment of this Act. All right, relationships to others. Laws. Relation to other laws. This is Title 30 U.S. Code 1753. Section 304A. The penalties authorities provided by this Act are supplemental to, not in derogation of any of the penalties authorized contained in any other provision of law. Nothing in this Act shall be construed with the reduce the responsibility of the Secretary to ensure prompt, proper collection of the revenues from the coal, uranium, and other energy, non-energy minerals of the federal Indian land, with the restraint of the Secretary for entering into cooperative agreement or other appropriate arrangement with the state Indian tribe that shall royalty management and responsibility activities for such minerals under existing authorities, except as expressly provided in subsection 302B, but nothing at the Act shall be construed to enlarge, diminish, or otherwise affect the authority of the responsibility of the Inspector General of the Department of the Interior of the Comptroller General of the United States. Nothing provisions of the Act impair of the effects of the land, but the interest of land intrude with the Tennessee Valley Authority. All right, effective date. Section 305, which is part of noted is Title 30 U.S. Code 1701. Section 305 of the provision of this Act shall apply with the oil and gas lease issued before and on after the date of the enactment of this Act, except in the case of the lease issued before such a date. No provisions of the Act, rule, with a regulation prescribed under this Act shall be expressed in specific provisions such as the lease. Fundings, Title 30, Section 1754, Section 306, effective to October 8, 1983, hereby authorized to appropriate such sums as necessary to carry out the provisions of this Act, including such sums as may be necessary for the cooperative agreement, the contract delegation authorized by this Act, provided that nothing in this Act will be constructed to effectively impair any of the authority to enter into the contract or more payments under any other provisional law. Statute for the limitation, Title 30 U.S. Standard Code 1755, Section 307, except in the case of the fraud of any action of the covered penalties under this Act shall be barred unless this Act, if it commences within 6 years after the day of the Act of admission, which is the basis for their action. Alright, expended royalty obligations, Title 30 U.S. Standard Code 1756, and this is Section 308. Any lease liable royalty payments on oil and gas lost wasted from a lease site which lost or waste is due to the negligence of any of the part of the operator of the lease, due to the failure to comply with any of the rule, regulation, ordered, or citation issued under the Act or any mineral leasing law. All right, severability. Title 30 U.S. Standard Code 1757, Section 309. If any of the provisions of the Act of the inapplicable thereof, any of the circumstances held invalid, the remainder of this Act with the application of such provision to other person circumstances shall not be effective thereby. All right, Title 4, reinstatement of leases, conversions, and unpatented oil placer claims. Amended of the Mineral Act, Leasing Act of 1920.